Hey, this is Michael Lindsay. I'm out here in Milestone today with Chris Blose's Gas Monkey AJE Motorsports Husqvarna FC 250. Really good buddy of Chris's. The guy's race tech, so they lined me up with the team manager, Tony, to bring out the bike for me to test out here in Milestone. Now, admittedly, this is his bike from Vegas. This is a supercross bike, and that is always really interesting to ride on an outdoor track because it is a fun and slightly miserable experience at the same time, if we're being honest. Mostly comes down to suspension. This is his supercross settings. We didn't change anything other than the clicker positions after I rode a few laps on it. It's really interesting to see how compliant a suspension company can get supercross settings. In this case, Race Tech is somebody that Chris Blose has worked for a long time. He actually requested to get them involved with the team, starting just with his personal suspension, and that eventually moved to the motor department. It's about what you expect. It's extremely stiff, it's very held up in the stroke, and it mostly ramps up to a rate we are not used to in normal suspension. It's basically so you can go nearly face first into a supercross triple and not die on impact. It ramps up, but it's also very balanced. It's mostly that mid-stroke on, but where I was really impressed with this setting compared to the couple other supercross sets I've ridden before is how compliant Chris and Racer were also able to keep his initial fork setting. As for the motor mods on this bike, they're very limited. Race Tech wanted to keep the bike very reliable, very affordable for the team, but at the same time, they wanted to produce power that's capable of putting Chris up in that podium position, heat races, even chasing that level of results in main events. On their dyno, this bike stock makes around 38.5, 39 horsepower, and they've been able to get it up to about 47 with just head mods. They take care of the head, they do the services to deck the head, to do the valve seats themselves and port it. They take care of the mapping themselves with a Vortex box, and then they add a high compression piston. And then really other than that, the engine's stock on the bottom end, it has a Rekluse Torq Drive clutch, and with all that, they've been able to jump the bike up by 8 to 9 horsepower. But what really impressed me is how big of a range they kept it on. I kind of did a little bit of everything with the bike. We all know K-Team and Husky screamed. I'd leave it in second gear for a long time coming out of corners. I would short shift to in ruts in third, and it has a great range of power. It's not maybe as snappy or responsive as a true factory level 250 I've ridden, but it's really close to that mark. But it has a great balance between usable torque, so you can kind of jump into something, click second to third early and seat bounce, and it'll pull through the bottom end of the range and get through the rev range quickly. But at the same time, once it gets in the top end of the power, it continues to pull. It doesn't rev out too fast. You can leave it in second and scream it. And it's a really interesting combination for supercross. But honestly, the build we're talking about here, something they only had to open up the top end once or twice for the entire season. Never really had to go through the bottom ends. It's something that anybody watching this video could almost afford it, even if they're gonna go race at a local level. Outside of the amenities I listed in the engine, the bike does have a Pro Circuit pipe. It also uses WP 48mm cone valve forks. Albeit Race Tech actually takes the CV out, Chris prefers a mid-speed valve setting, so they swap over to that component. And then they use a production-based shock. They had the ability to test track shocks versus production. Chris actually liked the production shock feel. They just tuned it to his liking from there. Overall, I think the AJE Husky team has done a really good job of showing that you can ride 250 West, be extremely competitive, and not have bikes with $8,000, $9,000 engines in it and that have to be rebuilt every 5 hours. They built something that can put pretty much any rider out there inside the top 10, knocking on the door of the top 5, but without spending an arm and leg on the engine, something they can leave together all season. I think it's pretty impressive because they want to work harder for next season. I'll be curious to see where their bike gets next year. The team has some pretty cool plans next year to make some bigger improvements to the bike. We're going to try to loop back around and try it next year to see what kind of gains they make through another season of development. But overall, if you want to learn a little more about just all the parts layout for the bike, check out the description below. I'm going to list out everything. You can also hit the link in the description below. I'm going to interview the guys from Race Tech about the build to kind of explain some of it. I'll have some words from Chris Blose in there, along with the team owner, Tony, to explain their operation as well. If you like this content, make sure you hit subscribe. We're getting a bike testing season. We got shootouts coming. There's a lot more great to come. And also check out podcasts, the Off-Camber, and everything else on this channel.